We will try to look into the relationship of fraction, decimal, and percent. For now, let's go first to the definition of each of these three terms. So decimal, it's any number shown with a decimal point, and a number based upon the tens, hundreds, and the different place values like the thousands and so on and so forth. So some examples that you can have for decimal are this. You have 2 tenths, then you have 375 thousands and 86 and 4 tenths. So this is now a combination of a whole number and a decimal number. So we also have what we call the fraction. It's one or more of the equal parts of a whole. So a number usually expressed in the form a over b. So the other term that we are using for fractions are rational numbers. So we have a numerator and a denominator. So we have actually different kinds of fractions. The 1/3 is an example of a proper fraction. The 2 and 5 over 8 is a combination of a whole number and a proper fraction. We call this your mixed number. And then the 7 over 4, where the numerator is higher than the denominator, that we consider as our improper fraction. And percent. So the word percent comes from the Latin word which means each hundred or per hundred. We are using the symbol, for the percent. So if you read this, we will now have 70% or 6.5% and 4.09 or 4 and 900%. So these are the three basic things that we are going to discuss today. Now, let's look into the relationship of fraction, decimal, and percent. So as you notice, we are given here a fraction, which is actually 1/5. And when you say 1/5, that is actually part of a whole. If you are going to show that in a certain whole thing, like in this case, we actually have a whole and it is being divided by 5. Okay, it's divided into 5 equal parts and there is one part that is obtained from it. So there is what you call a certain part here which is obtained. Okay, so if you are going to look into it, it's actually this part which is representing now 1/5. Now, what you need to understand when we are dealing with fraction is it could actually be written in terms of what you call decimal or percent. So, looking into this, okay, so this is now the part which simply shows that this is the 1/5 of the whole thing. So, it's a part of a whole. Now, how do we change this fraction into the decimal form? So if you are going to look into this, you actually have the division as your operation. So always remember that when you have 1/5, this simply means that this is 1 divided by 5 because the fraction bar that we can see there denotes division. So if we are going to do this, we simply have 1 divided by 5, but division cannot be done unless we will try to add a decimal number. So we will now have, or we will append 0.0. Okay, and we can now proceed to the division process. So definitely 1 divided by 5 will give you a 0 answer. And then you have 1 or 10 now. This time 10 divided by 5, we have 2. So 2 multiplied by 5 is equivalent to 10. Therefore, the answer that we are having for this one is 0.2. So our answer simply would mean 0.2, and that is the equivalent of 1/5 to decimal. So 1/5 is equivalent to 0.2. Okay? Now, how about in percent? So remember, this is per 100, meaning if you are going to look into this fraction, or yeah, we have a certain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's supposed to be with the base of 100. So looking into it, you need to have 20. Okay, so if you are going to divide the whole thing, having that as your base, which is per 100, that would simply mean that we have 100 divided by the 5 equal parts, which means that each of this will represent a 20%. So this will be 20%, this will also be 20%, 20%, and another 20%. Okay, and of course, this one, which is actually the one which is shaded, will also be equal to the 20%. So we have now 100% as an equivalent of this whole thing. Okay, which means that we can now say that our percent for 1/2 or 1/5 is 20%. Okay. But there is actually a shorter process there. So if you have 0.2, this is in decimal form, we know that we are to multiply that by percent. So that means to say, one thing that we can do there is 0.2 multiplied by your 100%, because we are trying to show that in percent form, and therefore we have the answer, which is 20%. Now, what about if we are going to deal with the fraction alone? So definitely you will also have 1/5, and if you will multiply this 1/5 by 100%, still we will be getting, again, that will be 100% all over 1. So we need to cancel the 100% with the 5. And dividing now the 100 with the 5, the answer that we will be getting is 20. So therefore, the same result will be obtained. So we have 20% as the equivalent value for your 1/5 in percent. But this will not be advisable to do all the drawing. So that's why there are processes which are involved if you are changing fraction to decimal and then having it in percent. So for example, you have 1 and 22 over 25. So the 1 here is automatically your whole number. Okay, so we have 1, and the 22 over 5 will just be the one to be manipulated. So again, if you have a whole number, that represents the whole number in your decimal form. So 22 over 25, again, the process will just be to divide. Okay, you divide the numerator by the denominator. Again, it's not advisable to be doing the representation. So because what if, for example, it's divided into 700 or more, so that will be a lot of work to do. So let's move on to the definition. You have 22 over 25. Therefore, what we just simply have to do here is to divide now your 22. Okay, again, 22 divided by 25. Okay, as you notice, once again, 22 is smaller than 25. Therefore, we simply have to add or append your decimal point 0. And then you can now have 0 for that because 22 cannot be divided by 25. So you go directly now to the 220 divided by 25. So we will have an answer which is 8. 8 times the 25 will give us a 200. Okay, so we have to do, what to do next is to subtract. So subtracting 0 and 0, we still have 0. And then 2 with the 0, we have 2. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. So we have to append another 0. So having now another 200, and 200 divided by the 25 is equal to 8 again. And then multiplying 8 and 25, that will now give us 200. So our answer for this is 0.88. But there is an existing 1, okay, because of the whole number that we have seen a while ago. So it's a part of the given. So therefore, we just simply add this 1 to the 0.88, giving us now an answer which is 1.88. Okay, and of course, the percent, all we have to do is to multiply this by 100. So multiplying 1.88 by 100%, the answer that we will be getting is simply 188%. Okay, so you expect that if you are looking for the percentage and the uh, percent is 188, the result that you will be getting is higher than the base. Okay, so we have now 7 over 8. What are we going to do if we are to change that? Again, the same solution will be done. We just have to divide the 7 divided by 8. Again, we get the 7 and we divide that by 8. So 7 is again smaller than the 8. Therefore, there is a need for us to append a decimal point. We now have how many groups of 8s are there in 7? So there are 7 or 8. So there should be 8 because 8 times 8 is 64. And okay, we proceed to subtraction. You subtract now 70 and 64. That gives you an answer of 6. We append another 0. So we have 60. 60 now divided by 8 gives us 7. So 7 times 8 is 56. And if you notice, division is not yet done. So we can now proceed, or we can still have this. So 60 minus 56 gives us a 4. And you will now have another 0. So if you will see, if you can see that that is 8, you have up to 3 decimal places. Okay, so 40 divided by 8, that gives us a 5. And multiplying now 5 and 8, that is now equal to 40. So again, 40 minus 40 is equivalent to 0. So that means to say that the answer that we are getting here is 0.875 or 875 thousandths. And how do we do that in percent? Okay, so you just have to multiply this by 100. Therefore, again, if you are multiplying by 100, you just have to move 2 places to the right. Therefore, the answer that we are getting is 87.5%. And the last one, we have 1/3. Again, that is the same. You will now get 1, and you are to divide that by 3. And then we have to append the decimal point. You have 0.0. And of course, 1 divided by 3 is 0. So we go directly now to your 10. 10 divided by 3, the answer is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, if you will have this again, we have another one, and then if you will continue with this, you will notice that there is no end. This is what we call your repeating non-terminating. Okay, repeating non-terminating decimal. We will just continue to have 0.33333 and so on and so forth. So if that is the case, we stop 0.33, and then after that, we will just have 1 as the numerator, and then copy the 3 as the denominator. So as you notice, we have now a complex decimal number. So we have now 0. We will now change that and have it 0.33 and 1/3. Okay, and if you are going to multiply that so that we will be getting an answer which is in percent, again, you just have to move the decimal point 2 places. Therefore, the answer that you will be having is 33 and 1/3%. Again, 33 and 1/3%. That is the equivalent of 1/3 as a part of a fraction or in fraction, 0.33 and 1/3 as a decimal, and 33 and 1/3 as a percent. So that's how fraction could be named as decimal and percent. Now, suppose you are given the decimal and we are to change that into fraction and percent. So how are we going to do that? So let's go to the next slide. We have here examples of decimal numbers and we want them changed in fraction and percent. So actually, if you are given the decimal, there is no more problem when we are changing it into its percent form. Why? Because you just have to multiply by 100, the same method that we did a while ago. So we know that this will become 35%, and then 0.4 multiplied by 100 is actually 40%. So we have now 40%. The 1.3, again, you multiply this by 100%, so that becomes now 130%. And of course, your 66 and 2/3 percent, or 0.66 and 2/3, will just simply be also 66 and 2/3 percent. So as simple as that one. Now the problem comes in when suppose I want to get the fraction of this decimal number. So simply you can actually have the decimal and try to recall your lesson on your place value. So having 0.35, the way that we can read this could be 35 hundredths, correct? So 35 hundredths would mean that you can actually have 35 over 100, because that is the place value it holds. So 35 over 100, again, this is tens place. This holds the tens place. This is the hundreds place. So 35 over 100. The only thing that we need to do now here is to find for the lowest term. So what's that number that can divide 35 and 100? So it's obvious to be 5. So what are we going to do? We divide the 35 by 5, having that as 7 now. And 100 by 5, the answer is equal to 20. So 7 over 20 is, of course, the answer that you have here. 7 over 20. Okay, and then 0.4. So 4. If you are going to look into the place value of this, it's simple. It's as simple as 4/10. So 4 over 10, because that is now the place value it holds. Therefore, 4 over 10, it's divisible by 2. So 4 is divisible by 2, and so with 10. Therefore, dividing 4 and 10 by 2, we simply have the 2 over 5, and that's the fractional equivalent. What about if you have 1 and 3/10? So remember, this is the whole number, while this one is 3/10. So simply we have 1 as the whole number and then 3/10. So we will now have 3 and then tenths, which is actually the place value of your digit 3. Now this one is a little complicated because you have 66 and 2/3 and or 0.66 and 2/3. So if I may explain that, if you are going to look into this, so 66 and 2/3 could be named here as over 100. So the fraction has no place value. It will just be this tenths, hundredths. Therefore, if you are going to rewrite this in terms of your fraction, it's actually 66 and 2/3 all over 100. Okay, so if you are going to look into this, again, the fraction bar would denote the division procedure, correct? So if that is 66 and 2/3 divided by 100, how are we going to do this? Now, if you are trying to divide fractions, again, the 3 letters that we need to remember, you have to keep, you have to flip, and then you have to change the operation. I actually have one lesson about the division of fraction in the link. So That is also one topic that we already had. So 66 and 2/3. 66 and 2/3 will have to be changed into its improper form. So multiplying 3 times 66, that gives an answer of 198. Plus the 2 is 200. So the improper form of this is 200 all over 3. And again, we are dividing that by 100. But we go back to the rule when you are dividing. Again, you have to keep the first term, which means you have to keep the dividend. You have to flip. So when you flip the 100, that's understood to be 100 over 1. Therefore, that becomes now 1 over 100. So it's a unit fraction that you will be getting. And then the C, which means you have to change now the operation from division to multiplication. Okay? And the rule in multiplication is you can possibly do now your cancellation process. So 100 and 200 are both divisible by 100, making now your 100 as 1, while your 200 is 2. And multiplying the numerators, 2 times 1, the answer that you will be getting is 2. And multiplying now your denominators, 3 and 1. So 3 times 1 is equivalent to 3. So this is now the fractional equivalent. So 2/3 in fraction, 66 and 2/3 hundredths as your decimal, and 66 and 2/3 percent. Okay, so again, if you're given the decimal, you can have that in fraction by trying to remember the place value, and the percent, of course, simply multiply by 100. Now, the next is if you are given the percent. So let's go to the other slide. You have now percent here, and we are to exchange or to change this one into the decimal form. So when you are trying to change percent to decimal, that is not too difficult because we just have to divide that by 100. So basically, when you divide, we simply have to move the decimal point 2 places. So if you cannot see any decimal point, you have to locate it at the end. So that simply means that you have here 33.1/3. So the 1/3 doesn't hold any place value. So therefore, moving the decimal point 2 places to the left, that would be moving it to the left now because we are dividing by 100. So the decimal point would end here. Okay, so we will just have to add points or 0 point and then the 33 and 1/3. Okay. And then, of course, your 12.5%, what do we have? Again, you have to move the decimal point 2 places. And then, since you don't have any number left here, you just write 0 to show that the whole number is 0. So, we have now 0.125. Okay, and then you have 115%. So from the decimal point, as you notice, this is a whole number, 115. So the decimal point is understood to be at the end. So we have to move again 2 decimal places. So the answer that you will be getting there is 1.15. And the last one is 0.065%. That simply means that you have to move again to 0. So you will notice here that there will be an addition of how many zeros more. So there will be 1, 2, and then we copy now the given, which is 0, 6, 5. And that is already the decimal equivalent. Now, the problem is, how are we going to change these numbers, your percent, into your fraction? How do we do that? So, the given is 33 and 1/3%. Now, remember, this one thing that you have to remember here. Your term percent would mean over 100 or per 100. So, that just simply means that I can actually rewrite the 33 and 1/3. So the 33 and 1/3 actually means, or percent actually means over 100. Okay? So the 12.5%, that actually means 12.5 over 100. Okay, if I am removing now the percent sign there. And so with the 115, so this 115 would simply mean 115%. And of course, the 0.65. So we have a 0.065, and then again, this is all over 100. Okay? So that's actually the meaning of each of the given terms here. So looking into the first given, wherein you have 33 and 1/3 all over 100, this is actually similar to the one that we had a while ago, wherein we are now having 33 and 1/3, and we are dividing this by 100. So what do we do if this is the case? Again, the rule is you have to change this one into its improper form. 3 times 33 is 99, plus 1 is 100. So there is 100, and then over 3. And we change the operation to multiplication, and we have to get the reciprocal of 100, and that is 1 over 100. So you will notice here that that there is a certain number that we can cancel, automatically cancel 100 with the 100, leaving only simply the 1, and of course 1 also in the numerator here. So multiplying now, 1 times 1, that's 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Therefore, the answer that we are getting here is 1/3. Okay, now what about this? The 12.5 over 100. Now, for us to get rid of the decimal point that is existing, what can we possibly do? We can actually move this or multiply this by 10, so that the answer that you will be getting is 1,000 or 125 over 1,000. Okay. If you are going to use this, the 0.125, actually it results right away to 1,000, 125 over 1,000, because the place value of this is tens. Again, the place value of this is tens, hundreds, and then thousands. So if you are referring to your answer, it's 125 over 1,000. Okay, so we have, or 12.5 over 100. By multiplying this by 10, we get 125. Multiply also the 100 by 10, you get 1,000. And then if you look into the lowest term of 125 by 1,000, we can actually start first by 5. So when you divide this by 5 over 5, okay, because that's the one which is obvious, we can now have an answer, which is 125 by 5 is 25. And then dividing now your 1,000 by 5, this gives you 200 as the answer. But as you notice, 25 is a factor of 200. Okay, so that means to say we can again divide this both by 25 over 25, and the answer that you will be getting when you do that, 25 divided by 25, the answer is 1, and 200 divided by 25, the answer that you will be getting is 8. Okay, so that simply means that the equivalent of this in fraction is 1 over 8. Okay, and then for, of course, the 115, you have 115 over 100. We can actually change this first into your mixed number, making it 1 and 15 over 100. So we can change 115 to 1 and 15 over 100. That is changing improper to a mixed number. And then after doing that, we can now just have to copy the whole number, which is 1. And then 15 over 100. What's the number that can divide both 15 and 100? Okay, so it's 5. Therefore, we divide 15 by 5. The answer that you will be getting there is 3. And divide 100 by 5. So dividing 105, the answer that you will be having there is 20. So therefore, we have 1 and 3 over 20. So the answer that we will be getting there is 1 and 3 over 20. Okay. And then this one, you have a whole number. So a decimal number, a decimal percent. So if you will be, the expected answer here must be very small, okay, when you have a fraction. So if you are looking into this, this is actually now tens, hundreds, thousands. So we need to multiply this by 1,000 so that it becomes a whole number. So which simply means that you will be having 65. Okay, we have to multiply by 1,000, and multiplying now 100 by 1,000, 100 has 2 zeros, 1,000 has 3 zeros. Therefore, that will result already to 100,000. Okay, because there are 5 zeros that are already involved. Now, if you are going to look into the problem here, wherein you have the decimal equivalent, place value tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and then hundreds, 100,000. So we have 65 over 100,000s. Now, check on this. There is only one number that can divide them, and obviously that is 5. So we just divide the 65 by 5. And the answer that we are getting there is 13. 65 divided by 5, that's equivalent to 13. And then the 100,000 when divided by 5 will simply give you 20,000. So the answer that you will be getting there is 13 over 20,000. So as I have said a while ago, it is a very small number. Okay, 13 all over 20,000. Okay, so again, that is how you change your percent into decimal and percent to fraction. Those are the relationship of fraction, decimal, and percent.